They said she was lucky to even get a seat, but no one in that restaurant knew the truth hiding behind her quiet eyes. At 74, Evelyn Carter had survived far worse than a waitress's contempt, yet nothing stung like being treated as if she didn't belong in a room she helped build. A glass of water, a dry roll, and 2 hours of silence became her welcome. But the moment one familiar voice entered, the balance of the room began to shift. At 12:47 p.m., a waitress leaned over a corner table and spoke just loud enough for the entire lunch crowd to hear. "Water and bread are fine for someone like you." The words sliced through the bright, busy room. Evelyn Carter, 74, sat alone with her hands folded, her silver bracelet catching the noon light. She had arrived early for her reservation, yet 2 hours later the only things in front of her were a sweating glass of tap water and a dry roll she hadn't touched. Around her, plates clattered and conversations rose in waves. Servers rushed past carrying steaming dishes for customers who'd arrived long after she did. Evelyn kept her shoulders straight even as the hunger tremor in her hands worsened. The waitress smirked, already turning away. What she didn't realize was that one person about to walk through that door could flip the entire room on its head. Time dragged like wet sand. Every few minutes Evelyn lifted her gaze, hoping the waitress would return, but the woman moved through the dining room with practiced blindness, seeing every table except hers. Once, Evelyn raised her hand gently. The waitress turned her head, then veered away as if the gesture were an inconvenience beneath her notice. The detail that stung wasn't the dry roll or the untouched menu. It was how the water had been placed earlier, held by its rim with 2 fingers, set down as if delivering something disposable. Evelyn felt the familiar tightness in her chest, not from anger but from a lifetime of having to stay composed while the world measured her worth through glances. At the booth behind her, a woman whispered loudly, "She's been sitting there forever. Why don't they move her somewhere else? It throws off the atmosphere." The waitress chuckled as if the comment were true. Evelyn's stomach cramped again. She reached into her purse for a mint, but her hand brushed the silver bracelet instead. Her late husband's. She breathed slowly, regaining balance. She tried once more. "Excuse me," she said softly. "Could I place my order now?" The waitress didn't stop walking. "I told you, kitchen's busy. We're preparing for an important lunch. Real clients." "I made a reservation," Evelyn said gently. "Then it must have been a mistake," the waitress replied, shrugging. "People slipped through." The words settled like dust over the table. Another 10 minutes passed. Evelyn pressed one hand against the table when a wave of dizziness returned. She'd been diabetic for years, long waits without food were dangerous. Still, she refused to cause a scene. The waitress came by again, empty-handed. Evelyn gathered her breath. "Could I have the check, then? For the water and bread?" The waitress blinked in surprise, then smirked. "If you insist." A brittle silence settled over the room. Beneath it, something unseen began to shift, like the first tremor before an oncoming storm. The manager arrived before the check did, his badge polished, his smile thin. "Ma'am, I'm afraid we need this table. There was an error. You shouldn't have been seated here. Our board is arriving soon." Evelyn looked up, steady but pale. "I've been here 2 hours. And we apologize," he said without meaning it. "But this is their preferred space." Evelyn tried to stand, but her body wavered. "I only asked for the meal I reserved." "Let's not make this difficult," he said, lowering his voice as if her presence were the problem. At that moment the waitress returned and dropped the bill onto the table. It skidded to Evelyn's elbow. $4. For tap water and a dry roll. A few diners shook their heads but stayed silent. Evelyn opened her wallet with trembling fingers. Then the restaurant door opened. 4 sharply dressed executives stepped inside. Their eyes scanned the room, until the lone woman among them froze. "Mrs. Carter," she said, voice instantly warm. Oh my goodness, we're late. The manager's jaw slackened. The waitress's face drained of color. The woman hurried to Evelyn's side. Everyone, this is Evelyn Carter, the founder of the Community Advancement Fund. The room fell silent. Another executive added, half this restaurant's corporate contract exists because of her approval. The air went still, as though the entire building were holding its breath. The manager stepped forward, words tripping over themselves. Mrs. Carter, we had no idea. Evelyn rose slowly, gripping the back of the chair for balance. Her voice was calm, almost tender. You didn't need to know who I was to treat me decently. The executives exchanged a charged glance. The woman turned to the staff. Is this how you treat our partners? The manager stuttered. It was a mix-up. We can fix it. Evelyn shook her head. No. There was no mix-up. She placed the $4 bill on the table. A gesture so small, yet it struck the room like a quiet thunderclap. We'll hold our meeting elsewhere, she told the board. Somewhere that respects every customer. As she walked toward the exit, the executives followed, gravity shifting behind her like a tide. Near the door, one murmured, we'll review their contract this afternoon. Evelyn didn't look back. She adjusted her silver bracelet and stepped into the sunlight, leaving the restaurant in the kind of silence that forces people to remember exactly what they did, and who they dismissed.